you can go ahead, please.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure.
Muito obrigada, é um prazer. Eu gostaria de fazer um brinde para o Brasil, um dos meus destinos favoritos. Já fui aí 2 vezes, aí em São Paulo, no Rio e em Foz do Iguaçu. Realmente espero poder voltar em breve. É um prazer falar para vocês sobre esse tema. Quais são as oportunidades no Brasil? Eu não vou falar que eu sou especialista no Brasil, mas eu só vou apresentar algumas das experiências que eu já adquiri no meu trabalho, especialmente nos Estados Unidos e Canadá, mas também em outros países. Eu fui sortudo o suficiente por trabalhar em 5 dos 6 continentes e apresentar e conhecer pessoas em todos esses 6 continentes. Realmente espero que na nossa conversa isso...
So, the topic I will be talking about is electricity. Customers have become more demanding throughout the globe, whether it's Brazil or it's Chile or it's the United States or it's Europe. Every customer wants to lower their energy bills. The so-called millennials, the people born after the year 2000, have gone organic. It doesn't matter what their parents did. They want to have organic tea, they want to have organic food, they want to wear organic clothes even, and only see organic movies. They are truly organic. So what does that mean for us in the electricity business? It means that these customers are looking into self-generation as a way of becoming organic. If they can grow tomatoes in their backyard, why can't they produce their own power? That's the question they have. And if they are larger customers, like industrial and commercial customers, they're going to install microgrids. Additionally, builders are offering now zero energy homes. They have solar panels, they have very efficient equipment, they have net zero consumption. And that's today in 2021, not in 2030 or 2040 or 2050, happening today. It's been going on for 5 years. Utilities are going to be left behind in the dust unless they modernize their tariffs, or they will begin to lose their customers. Technology has entered the room, the customer's room. Appliances, light bulbs, and water heaters today are much more energy efficient than they were just 10 years ago. They're coming with timers and they have Wi-Fi capability. Central air conditioners, room air conditioners, heat pumps, gas furnaces, you cannot buy an inefficient equipment anymore. It's no longer being produced. Customers are often combining these smart energy using HVAC equipment with smart thermostats. Wi-Fi is now everywhere, whether it's your smartphone or your apps. And as a customer, you can control the equipment remotely. So recognizing this in the United States, each of the states are setting very aggressive targets for becoming green, increasing the share of renewable energy, in other words, on their supply side. Hawaii, California, etc., they want to be 100% green somewhere between 2032 and 2045. To be honest, nobody knows how they will get there. They have set the goals and they're hoping the scientists in the labs, the universities, they will not disappoint them. And it's so far away that nobody making that commitment today is going to be around in a position of authority by then. Some others have set more modest targets, but you can see more and more of this is happening. And this is just a US snapshot. It's, I'm sure, similar around the globe in many other countries. There's the Paris Agreement, for example. There are all kinds of things happening in Germany, I'm sure you're following, in England. So let's briefly do a quick tour of some of these technologies, and then I will discuss the tariffs that need to change in order to integrate these technologies into the grid. The first and most obvious one is solar panels. By the way, this is a picture of my own house. It was easy to take the picture during the pandemic, so I just took mine. I put them 2 years ago. I waited for 5 years. I said, maybe there's a cost shift, maybe there's a subsidy with them. But then I said, I have to look out for my own interests. The utility can worry about its own interests, and other customers can worry. So everyone is for themselves to lower their bills, to improve reliability and to promote clean air. In California today, 10% of the homes have smart solar panels on them. By the year 25, the projection is 50%. And the graph is just showing the picture in the US as a whole. California and Hawaii are the two leading this revolution. I'm sure you know what's happening in Australia. That percentage is already 25 to 30% in South Australia and in Queensland. Why is this happening so fast? Two simple reasons. One, organic taste, therefore self-generation. Secondly, they are tired of paying higher bills. And more customers are now installing batteries that go with the solar panels to improve the chances of having power when the grid is down. In other words, to enhance reliability. In Hawaii, the percentage of new solar panels that are paired with batteries is now 80%. In California, it's 10%, but rising very fast as we have more outages because of the wildfires and other distributional challenges. That figure is going to rise. At the other end of the spectrum, people are buying electric cars. Electric cars are still a small share of all cars on the road. This is the sales in the United States. In California, half of the electric cars in the United States are located, 50% in one state, but it is going to spread. You may have read in Norway, last month, the percentage was 100% of the cars sold were electric cars. But that's an interesting challenge because you might say if electric prices are high and people are putting in solar panels, why are they buying electric cars? Well, because even with the high electric prices, you can still save about 75% on your driving cost compared to a gasoline car. Gasoline is even more expensive than electricity. It's all relative to the alternative. And then within houses, within offices, the new development is heat pumps. Now, heat pumps are expensive. And if you already have natural gas, they don't really work out unless we lower the price of electricity or we lower the price of a heat pump by providing customers an incentive, or we put a tax on gas, or we ban the sale of gas appliances, which is happening in some regions. Okay? So that's an interesting development. This is going to boost electricity sales. Electric cars are going to raise electric sales, but solar is going to reduce them. So you have forces, plus and minus, happening at the same time. Data centers, right? They're everywhere now. Well, because these companies are high tech, and because young CEOs head these companies, and because these are the millennials, they don't want to buy power that is not green power. So what they're doing is they tell the utilities, we will only buy your power if it is green. And these are the tech companies, but also the big box stores like Best Buy and Kroger and Walmart, and universities and state governments. So that's the commercial sector for you. In the industrial sector, large facilities, they are also trying to become climate neutral. And one of the major things they're doing is investing in modernizing the facilities and installing cogeneration systems, as well as on-site solar. So that's the context, that's the new development. Utilities have not responded. Most of them have tariffs which go back to the 1950s. Now, it's not just half a century ago, it's 7 decades ago. The 50s ended. Man landed on the moon in 1969, but our tariffs are still about the time that the Korean War ended. Okay? We have flat rates. We recover all the costs through flat volumetric rates with very we have inclining or declining block rates with low fixed charges, and sometimes we have seasonal rates. So it's all like a nice movie that would be good to see to cut the time some evening, but it is not the reality that customers have. So the tariffs of tomorrow are beginning to take shape before our eyes. What are those? They are time of use rates with significant price differentials between peak and off-peak. SMUD, the utility that serves Sacramento, the capital of California, has instituted those rates for all its customers. Then you have three-part rates, which have demand charges. We have dynamic pricing rates. We have real-time pricing rates, hourly pricing rates. And then you have prices that come from the grid and go directly to these smart devices. So all of this I will explain a little more, but change is happening. And that's the point I want to make here. So the big question that people ask me is, will customers respond to these rates? Is there any evidence that this is not just an economist's dream, a professor's blackboard exercise? Is this the reality that we're going to see in the markets? And the answer is yes. And it's not just based on my opinion. It is based on empirical data from 400 experiments, pilots, and full-scale deployments around the globe. On the horizontal axis of this chart, I have the peak to off-peak price ratio. In other words, how much more expensive is peak power compared to off-peak power. On the vertical axis, I have the reduction in peak load that occurs in response to that price ratio. And I'm referring to time varying rates, which I'm calling TVR, like time of use rates or real-time pricing rates. They are TVRs. And so if the price ratio is 10 to 1, in other words, the off-peak price is 90% lower, roughly speaking, than the peak price, then you will see a reduction in peak demand of about 16%. If you combine a smart thermostat with that peak to off-peak ratio, you're going to significantly increase that reduction, and you will be looking at about a 28% reduction. So in the United States and in other countries, people are now beginning to offer free smart Wi-Fi thermostats to customers who are willing to get on these rates. And that's really the way to move the needle, as they say, to make things happen. So what's my recommendation for utilities in Brazil and for regulators and policymakers, and of course the government of Brazil? My recommendation is to recognize that no two customers are alike, that you will have customers who want to lower their bills with flexible prices. You will have others who don't want to. So offer them a choice. Give the customers a choice and they will make the decision. Just like when they go to shop for groceries, they have a choice. When they shop for clothing, they have a choice. When they shop for electricity, they don't have a choice. They don't like it. Actually, they hate it, to be perfectly blunt. And so when you give them choice, you'll have happier customers. And if you have happier customers, your regulators will be happy with you. And you will get the investments you need to modernize the grid. So this chart has risk on horizontal axis, or bill volatility. It has rewards, bill savings on the vertical axis. With the real-time pricing, there's a lot of risk. However, there's a lot of savings as well over the course of the year. It's like buying a stock. There's a high risk stock, like buying a Tesla stock or an Amazon stock. Not everybody wants to do it, but those who do, they profit from it enormously. Okay. At the other end of the spectrum, completely the other end, there's the guaranteed bill. Customers just want to lock it in. It's like buying a bond, right? And so you will get a very small return, but your money will be there. It's like a checking account. You know, the interest rate might be 0.05%, but you will get it for sure, and your money will not grow. And so give customers the same kinds of choices they have when investing or when buying a mortgage, adjustable rate mortgage versus a fixed rate mortgage. All of those are options. Even airlines have this. You can buy a ticket and you lock it in, it'll be expensive, or you can buy the ticket the day before the flight and it'll be very expensive. People have a choice in all aspects of life. Give them a choice for electric tariffs as well. Now, this is just for your reference. You can look at this table later on. I'm just showing you tariffs not just in the US, but in Ontario, Canada, in Great Britain, in France, Spain, and Italy. And you will see a lot of these places are offering various kinds of tariffs like time of use, real-time pricing, peak time rebates. And a fair number of customers are participating in those rates. And they are saving money, and they're helping the utilities save money by avoiding investing in peak generating capacity, which is only used for 200 or 300 hours a year. I'll just focus on one of these, which is Oklahoma. It's the top line. They have 20% of their customers in a form of dynamic pricing. And those customers reduce their peak load by 40% when the high price comes through. They have a smart thermostat as well. And so what's in it for them? Why are they doing it? Because their bill for the year goes down by 20%. A lot of savings opportunities. So how should Brazil look at this issue? So I lay out here the steps that you can look at over the next few years. First of all the rates I have presented, we can discuss those later on in detail. Shorten the list. Maybe it's time of use. Maybe it's peak time rebates. Maybe it is real-time pricing. Figure out how customers' bills will change as you implement those rates. Some will have lower bills, some will have higher bills. Try to find a way to lower the higher bills. And then allow for price elasticity or demand response. Rerun your bill impact analysis with the math of price response or price elasticity. Consider remedies to mitigate the adverse bill impact, like give them bill protection for 1 year, or gradually phase in the rate, not right away. And then comes the most important step, which many people forget. Step number 6, conduct focus groups. Talk to customers, see if this is something they're interested in. If they're not interested in, ask them why. Modify the rates to make them interesting to the customers. Number 7, run a pilot to measure their response, just like the 400 pilots that other countries have done. I think Brazil should run a few pilots in Sao Paulo and Rio and other places. And then once you know what the reality is, then figure out, do you want to do this opt-in or opt-out or mandatory? And then, of course, once you've rolled it out, track deployment to see how it's working and make changes as needed. This is the 9-step process that other countries have followed, the ones that have succeeded. The ones that have not succeeded have not followed the process and made errors, and then they have killed everything. So the big question is, customers are putting in all these new technologies that I have mentioned to you. They want to lower their bills, number 1. They want to promote decarbonization. And number 3, they want to promote resilience. In other words, if the power goes out, they want to have backup power. So the question now being asked is, solar is being installed and net metering is being questioned. Is it a good thing or a bad thing? Should we change it? In Australia and in Hawaii, 1/3 of the customers have installed rooftop solar panels. In California, the number is 1 out of 10. So utilities are in a panic mode. They're seeing their business model has been turned upside down. They fear that they're going to lose control. And so in many places, such as in the US, they're trying to change NEM and replace it with successive tariffs that reduce the cost shift that occurs when prosumers reduce their usage drastically, sometimes by 50%, sometimes by 75%, sometimes even by 100%. And so successive tariffs are gradually beginning to be rolled out. And what do they include? The last bullet tells us minimum monthly bills. So even if you reduce your usage dramatically, you still have to pay a minimum amount because you're still connected to the grid, because you still use power from the grid at nighttime when the sun has gone down. Step number 1. Step number 2, a higher fixed charge. Step number 3, time of use rate. And step number 4, and this is proving to be the most popular step, is reduce the prices that the customer is paid when they export power to the grid. Right now, it is the retail rate, and they're saying reduce it to the wholesale cost of power, or reduce it to half of what it's currently today. And then the last topic I will touch upon is, would it be useful to introduce retail choice of provider, customer choice, not of tariffs, but of the providers themselves? So Great Britain liberalized its power markets in the 1990s to much acclaim. This was the Margaret Thatcher era. Stephen Littlechild, Professor Littlechild, was the person who really gets the credit for making it happen. By the way, he's still around. He's very prolific, and I can introduce you to him if you want at some point. He could give a webinar to you as well. Why was that done in England? It was done to lower customer bills and provide them better service. That was the theory. The British model was immediately copied by Australia and New Zealand, eventually by several European countries, and then it came to the US, crossed the Atlantic, and the US was swept with retail choice fever, let's call it that. Okay. So in 1999, I was swept with that fever as well. I had more hair on the head at the time. So I co-edited a book on customer choice, finding value in retail electricity markets. And my co-authors in the book included Mike Peavy, who later became the president of the California Commission and was on that position for 10 years, and Kenneth Lay, the founder and CEO of Enron. Those people were not famous back then. They agreed to write papers for me, and they were in that book. And suddenly we had that horrible energy crisis just 1 year after the book was published. And 2 years after the book was published, California froze customer choice. In North America, that was like a horrible piece of news, and choice froze everywhere. In Canada, there are only 2 provinces today with choice, Alberta and Ontario. In the US, there are about 18. In one of them, which is Texas, the Lone Star State, they have the British model. They do not have a default or regulated rate plan. In all of the other regions, the vast majority of customers have a regulated retail plan or default plan, and most of them are staying on that. They don't trust retail choice. They've had bad experiences. So there's little evidence today from anywhere in the globe, including Great Britain, and I've talked to Professor Littlechild. He's very disappointed as to what's happened. There's no evidence really that retail choice has lowered customer bills or improved service for residential customers. It has for industrial customers. That's a different story, but not for residential customers. So what suggestions can I provide to Brazil based on this review? Now, it's a little arrogant of me to suggest anything to you. You know it much better than me, but I'll take some liberties as a professor and the talk I've given. So here is a 5-point action plan that Brazil might want to consider. It should begin the journey of giving customers choices by reforming tariffs along the lines of what other countries and the US has done. To remove the apprehension that many people have, oh, these tariffs, only those people will take them who have lower bills, and they will be the free riders, and everybody else's bill will go up because of the free riders. So conduct pilots to see if that's really true or not, and see what results you get. Don't prejudge a bad outcome and let that fear prevent you from achieving a better or good outcome, because the fear of the unknown is the worst fear we have. And this industry thrives on fear. I'll cite FDR, President FDR, who said, "We have nothing to fear but fear itself." Fear stops progress. Look at the tech companies. If they were fearful that nobody will buy a smartphone or a laptop, what would we have? We would have no smartphones in our hands today. So step number 3, start rolling out smart meters. My understanding is Brazil does not have much of a population of smart meters. Start rolling them out so that you can offer those advanced tariffs. And by the way, besides giving customers choices, the smart meters give you faster outage detection, and they provide automated meter reading, so you save on the cost of meter reading. Step 4, assess the need for customers to install solar panels in Brazil. My understanding is the numbers are still very low. I think it is not an issue until it becomes at least 5% of your peak demand. It's not an issue even then. You can go to a time of use rate. If it becomes 10%, like California, then you can consider dropping the price for exports. But don't just eliminate net metering, because this is an option to promote clean energy locally sited at the customer's facilities. It gives the customer more resilience and gives the customers lower bills. And lastly, Brazil should review the history and track record of retail choice in other markets before deciding if it's worth going in that direction. It is very expensive. It promises the moon and does not even give you the earth. That's been my experience. But talk to Stephen Littlechild. The British House of Commons asked him to travel around the globe, which he did, US, Australia, New Zealand, and has written a report for Parliament. It's public domain. I can find a way to get that report to you. He is truly in the best position to give you advice on retail choice. So with that, I'm going to close the presentation. I have some references at the end of the deck that you can look at your leisure. If anyone would like any of those papers or presentation, I'd be happy to send them to Richard, who can perhaps share them with the broader audience. So I will turn it over to you back and see if there are any questions.
Professor Faruqui, thank you very much. We certainly have some questions. I encourage the audience to present questions. On the top right of your screen, there is a way to do it.
Can I stop the sharing?
Ok, please. Ok. Eu vou passar agora a palavra para o Richard Hostetler, que vai nos ajudar a encaminhar as perguntas para o professor Faruqui.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Yeah, let me start off right from the bat. You mentioned there's little evidence of retail choice reducing rates for customers or improving service. So given that, do you recommend we halt market liberalization, or do you suggest we continue with liberalization but maintaining the option of regulated service? Or maybe the other perspective, is there any harm that can be done by liberalization? Is there evidence of that to be considered?
Great question. Let me begin with the second part. Is there harm that could occur? Yes, you certainly look at the California experience where liberalization was exploited by certain companies, Enron and others, and is still being litigated. Billions of costs were incurred by California's customers. They're still paying for. California introduced something called the Competitiveness Transition Charge, or CTC. We are still paying the CTC 20 years after the crisis occurred, because there was a mushrooming of cost in the wholesale market. So there is a downside. On the other hand, we have learned a lot. We have figured out ways to prevent that from happening. And what happened in California has not happened in other markets. So I would certainly recommend that you roll it out cautiously, study the lessons, talk to Professor Littlechild, introduce it initially to the larger customers and do not immediately introduce it to the smaller customers. And the last word I would say on that is make sure that you continue to offer default supply, regulated price option, because that is the saving grace. In Texas, they eliminated it. They were just like the UK, and you saw what happened in the middle of February this year when they had no default option. And some people who had selected the real-time pricing option from retailers, their bills shot up, went through the roof, and they were in the thousands of dollars. And now you have litigation pending in the billions of dollars in Texas. That's what happened in California 20 years ago. So offer retail choice cautiously and with the default option.
In this morning's keynote address from Mr. Lochier, he also mentioned some of the similar experiences of frustration with liberalization and reforms. He talked about it's been surprising how sticky people are with changing habits and cultures. With that in mind, could it be that further on, we might see more results that we don't see currently. It'll just take more time than we expected for things to really pick up, and maybe there is benefits to be achieved from further liberalization?
Absolutely. I'll give you a specific response to your first statement. People are very sticky. They will not move. I did a study when I was working at EPRI in the late 1990s on how stickiness can prevent retail choice, how much of a price difference is needed. For industrial customers, even a 5% difference was enough to want them to switch. For residential customers, they needed a 25% difference to shift. Enron came in and they did a study and they said, we'll get 10% of the customers immediately, residential customers, because people just hate these utilities, these big monopolies, right? And they offered 2 weeks of free electricity if you switch to Enron. How many people switched to Enron? They thought it would be 10%. It was not even 1%. It was half of 1%. 2 weeks of free electricity was not sufficient because there are 50 other weeks in which the price was the same. So it's very hard to move the needle. And that is why and by the way, I am an economist. I support markets. You could say I'm a liberal, politically speaking, liberal in the American sense, not the British sense. And therefore I would support this. But I discovered that people manipulate other people. In Ontario, they have time of use rates. And so these people who came in, they said, oh, okay, so the retail regulator plan, 9 cents peak, 6 cents mid-peak, 3 cents off-peak. I'll offer you a flat rate of 8 cents. Many people fell for it because it looked lower than 9, but their average rate was 6. So then there's a backlash. So people are unscrupulous. Liberalization has to be done with caution, and there has to be some vigilance. In many US states, like New York, for example, they're going to end retail choice because it has been honestly a scam. And there's nothing worse than going to senior citizens and fooling them. There's nothing worse than going to low-income customers and fooling them and tricking them and locking them into high-price contracts because they just didn't do the analysis. It brings out the worst in humanity, unfortunately. So we have learned a lot in 20 years that you can benefit from as you embark on that journey.
Very well. Good words of caution. Oh, by the way, you were mentioning Mr. Littlechild. He was one of our panelists, or one of our keynote speakers in the first edition of the Brazil Energy Frontiers. So,
was that today or yesterday?
No, that was, I mean,
a prior year.
The first edition, which is.
Yeah, I mean, he's brilliant. I was actually on a panel with him last year, which was in Italy, a virtual panel, and I've gotten to know him quite well. So absolutely. You can also talk to some others in the US who have experience with the issue, and I can, suggest some names later on.
Mm-hmm. As far as you started your presentation talking about, the distributed energy resources and smart appliances and the new possibilities that brings for customer engagement. But many changes are needed for that to happen effectively. What advice do you give to the regulator to facilitate that process, to promote the transition? What are the do's and don'ts that you would mention on that?
Great question. It's come up in many of my recent engagements in Canada and in the US. Regulators are cautious, but at the same time, they realize that the renewable energy mix is going to rise with time, and it'll be intermittent as the sun gets cloudy or the wind stops blowing. So we need flexible load. In order to have flexible load, we need flexible prices that reflect the variation in wholesale prices. The fear they have, though, is some customers may see higher bills and there might be a revolt. And so, as I suggested in that 9-step process in that flow chart, do your homework, calculate the bill impacts by customer, at least for a sample of customers using your load research sample, and see how bad the impact will be on some customers, and try to change the rate so the impact is not quite as dramatic as it could be otherwise. Then reach out to customers, do workshops and focus groups to understand their concerns, and to refine your marketing material so they talk in the customer's language. Talk about the discount they will get, not about the rate increase that they will have. Tell them how other people in other countries have benefited from these rates. Nothing works like examples of real customers living normal lives with those new rates. So educate, inform, and then do the pilots. I think the way to end the uncertainty is to do pilots and see how it really works out. This process cannot be done in 1 month or 1 year even. It would take 2 to 3 years. And so it's a gradual process. You have a lot of good experience to draw upon from other countries that you can bring into the conversation and use that to guide the regulators. Anil, right?
Painel.
Yeah, so I have very smart people there. I've had the pleasure of interacting with them occasionally. They are at some of the US conferences as well. I think by sharing insights from Europe and North America, and to some extent, other parts of the globe like Asia, Australia, New Zealand, I think they will see that there are opportunities here that are too good to overlook, that it really would be important to start doing pilots. And I would not wait for too long. I think this process of studying the problem should be no more than 6 months, doing the bill impact analysis, looking at what the other countries have done. I actually have a report summarizing the global experience with innovative tariffs that I could send to you afterwards. So that's raw material. And then you start doing the pilots. And it takes about 6 months to design the pilots properly. So roughly 12 months to study and design the pilots. And then you can do the pilot for 1 or 2 years. By 2 to 3 years out, you will be fully in a position to go at this in a big way. Like the white tariff you have, you can look at other options like that, and then start pushing the envelope. And I don't see any reason why Brazil, which is a leader in so many areas around the globe on so many topics, why Brazil cannot become the leader in tariff innovation and reform.
You mentioned regulator. Yes, Director Sandoval is participating in this panel, and he'll be discussing later on today.
Excellent.
So, yeah, and they're participating.
And,
on that flow chart you discussed, one of the things you said is to decide if the alternative tariffs are optional, or if they're default, or if it's an opt-out situation. Who should make that choice? Is that something that the distribution company should propose and then the regulator evaluate, or is that something that, how is that governance process, or who takes the initiative in making those decisions?
It depends on the personalities, honestly. I've seen it initiated by the utility. I've seen it initiated by the governor, the regulators. Sometimes even the governor gets involved. Sometimes academics are the catalyst to make that happen. And I would suggest having some workshops with the relevant parties. The best approach, honestly, is a collaborative approach, as opposed to an adversarial approach. Sometimes when you make a filing as a distributor, it becomes adversarial. In other countries, I've seen it happen. In the US, it happens all the time. So it's best to think outside the box, and maybe your organization can sponsor those workshops. Think of it as a brainstorming session, learning from what has happened elsewhere, thinking about what's unique to Brazil that makes it different, and then coming up with some proposals. And then one of the parties can put the proposal out officially, and then the review process can begin. But it has to be a case where somebody has to begin the process, because I have been in situations where I've asked the utility, why is nothing happening? They say the regulator doesn't want to do it. At that same conference, I talked to the regulator privately and asked, why is this not happening? They say the utility doesn't want it to happen. So who's right? I mean, one of them is not right, or maybe they're just not talking.
You mentioned also that just offering time variable rates doesn't provide the full potential, that it's much higher impact if there's deployment of information technology together with that. What can be done to promote that or to have the most effective customer engagement?
So what we are finding is that there are 3 or 4 kinds of data which the customers need, because customers are not engineers, at least most of them. Customers are also not very interested in electricity. It's just one of the elements in their life. It's not particularly exciting, right? It's not like buying a new TV or a new car. However, they have to pay the bill and they hate paying the bill. So we have to educate them on where their bill is coming from. Is it the air conditioner? Is it the lights? Is it something else? We have to educate them on the fact that the cost varies by time of day. We have to educate them that power is carbon-free during certain hours and not carbon-free at other hours. That's the information gap that we have to fill. And that's where companies like Oracle and Bijli and others have come up with a variety of new machine learning algorithms to educate and inform customers. They create a web portal on the utility's website, and the web portal has to be customer friendly, and they can talk to the web portal and get directions on how to improve their bill, how to lower it, what is bigger, what's less important, when to plug in their electric car, when not to plug it in, those kinds of decisions. So that's the information part, but then comes also the hardware, the technology, the smart thermostat. That's equally important. So you need IT, but you also need digital technology, or DT. In addition to that, you need the human touch. You need an educated and trained labor force at the utilities who will take the phone calls when they will come, because they will come. When these new tariffs are introduced, there will be some confusion, and they will ask all kinds of questions. So you need to have human as well as artificial intelligence, as well as digital technology to make this happen. You can try doing it without that, and you will get 2% of customers on it, which is what you have today on the white tariff or something like that, right? So that's the manual approach. And that manual approach is there throughout the globe, has been there for half a century, and hardly any customers take these new tariffs because they're scared. They don't even know they exist. And the utility says to the regulator, yes, I have this tariff, but how many customers do you have on it? Oh, maybe 5 or maybe 10. How many customers do you have altogether? 1 million. Oh, okay. I went to a utility and I spoke about the need to be customer focused. And one of the people raised their hand and said, we already put in a new website. I said, so you put in a new website and you're saying you're customer focused. So how many people are using that website? And the answer was, I don't know. So were you customer focused, or were you doing a checklist? I didn't say that, of course, to the person, but it was, oh, I did the checklist. They said, put in a new web portal. I have no idea who's using it, what they're doing with it. Most utilities, I've discovered, don't even bother to talk to their customers, not even once, not to their friend or neighbor. So we need to realize, who was it? I think Aristotle, who said man is a social animal. And that is so true. We talk to each other as friends and neighbors. We learn from each other. And that's what we need to bring into this conversation, is customer to customer communication. Nothing sells better than one customer telling the other that, hey, I did this with the new tariff and my bill is lower. That's 100 times more effective than the regulator issuing a policy or the utility creating a new tariff. It doesn't happen by itself. Word of mouth is very important. But the good news is we have social media.
You addressed a little bit the issue of net metering, and as a good starting point to have customer engagement and promoting renewable energy and distributed generation. It's been a highly contentious issue here in Brazil, and from our previous conversations, we hear it's been that way in California also. Can you share a bit of your experience there And what are the lessons from that process?
So I have testified 9 times on this issue across the US, and I'm about to in Canada. It is a very contentious issue everywhere. Some people think they are paying for the other person's solar panels. It's gotten to be that bad. No robberies have occurred yet. Nobody's snatching the panels of other people's roofs, but I fear that might happen too at some point. So here is my advice. And believe me, I have no perfect answer. We all make mistakes and we learn from our mistakes. So I think don't panic too early, because that is bad. It's needless panic. You have much bigger problems to deal with than net metering. Just about every utility becomes obsessive about net metering before there is a need to. I have a heart attack over something that's not even worth having a hard burn over. So track it, measure the cost shift. If it becomes a big issue, like you have 5% of your customers on net metering, then it's an issue. But if it's less than 1%, don't even lose any sleep over it. Just track it. You can look at all the proposals that California has currently. I can send you a list, all of the various proposals out there that are indicating how to move beyond net metering 1.0. California is right now in net metering 2.0, and 2.0 has time of use rates. 1.0 was flat rates. 2.0 still has retail tariffs for buying and selling, but they vary by time period. Okay? It's a huge improvement. And now that we are at 10% penetration, they're looking at NEM at 3.0. And 3.0 is where you have 10 different perspectives. And I have a paper on that, which I summarized all the proposals, was published in Canada. I can send that to you, and we can have a further discussion at some point if that would be helpful. But my big advice is don't panic. I panicked, every utility panicked. They went to the commissions and the commissions rejected it. They rejected it every time. They would tell me privately, we agree with you, but we cannot do it yet because there are many customers who want it. The solar industry wants it. The government wants it. Who doesn't want it? Lower bills, green power, locally sited, resilient. It's sort of, California, by the way, has mandated solar panels on new houses. Every new house will have solar panels. This goes back to Governor Schwarzenegger, whose policy was 1 million solar roofs. So, but now there are other people in California panicking. And so, but California got to 10% before it panicked. I'd be already out of time.
Yes, we're passing our limit here, but thank you so much. Very elucidating, very interesting. Thank you, and yeah, let's keep in contact.
Absolutely, I'd love to. All the best. Take care.
Professor Faruqui,
very much. Thank you.
Professor Faruqui, thank you very much. We had Professor Littlechild 10 years ago in this conference. Now we have you. We certainly
I will pass that news on to him that I am his successor.
All right, sir. Very good professors.
Bye.
Thank you very much. Vamos fazer um intervalo.